In Behind the Sheet, we encounter brave women facing unthinkable hardships as they undergo involuntary experimental surgery. Here to give us insight into this harrowing real-life story is playwright Charly Evon Simpson. In addition to Behind the Sheet, she's the author of Jump, Form of a Girl Unknown, It's Not a Trip, It's a Journey, and other works for the stage. She was recently named the 2019-20 recipient of the Paula Vogel Playwriting Award from the Vineyard Theatre, co-recipient of the Dramatists Guild's Lanford Wilson Award, and had 2 of her plays on the 2019 Kilroy's list. Charly Evon Simpson, welcome to LA Theatre Works.
Thank you. I'm excited to chat.
When did you first become aware of the story of the women suffering at the hands of J. Marion Sims, represented by George in the play? And what inspired you to write about them?
I first learned about J. Marion Sims from an article. I believe it was on Gawker when that was still a website you could go to. And it was an article that focused on some protests that were happening at a statue in New York City. You know, the statue was of J. Marion Sims, and I did not know who that was. And so I read the article and basically began to learn that J. Marion Sims was a prominent figure in the field of gynecology and sort of rose to prominence because of experimentation he did on some of the enslaved women he had in his care. And I was just so surprised that I had never heard about this, being someone who goes to the gynecologist. And I sort of went down a Google rabbit hole and tried to learn as much as possible. And then a few months later, I had the opportunity to apply for an EST Sloan Commission, which is a commission that is all about, getting plays written about science. And I remembered this story, and I remembered just how shocked I was that I didn't know more. And I wanted the opportunity to write a play so that more people would know about this history.
I was curious about something when I saw that there was a statue of him. Was that statue ever removed?
Yes. So actually in April, not of this year, of last year, so 2018, it was actually removed from just outside Central Park and is being placed in Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, which is where he is buried. And there's actually been quite a lot of discussion, one with people near where the statue was in Manhattan to decide what will go in its place. And then Greenwood Cemetery is also trying to figure out exactly how they want to make use of the statue that was moved there and also include part of the story. So that part of the moving of the statue is not quite finished yet, but it was removed from Central Park last year.
He's been hailed as the father of modern gynecology. How did historians overlook the cruelty of his surgeries while honoring his achievements? And when did the truth about his work finally hit home?
I obviously am not a historian, but from what I can tell, there have been lots of historians that have looked into that history and have begun to discuss and sort of confront that history. And, there are historians that fall on both sides. For the play, I did quite a bit of research, and you have articles that are sort of pointing to the fact that, one historian believes that the women must have consented to the surgery in order for J. Marion Sims to be able to perform them. And then you have historians on the other side. I'm thinking of Harriet A. Washington and Deirdre Cooper Owens that sort of, have pointed out the inherent conflict you have with doing experimentation on enslaved Black women.
As you were writing Behind the Sheet, what was it like to experience the suffering and the grace of these enslaved women? I mean, at some point, did it become personal?
I think in some ways it was always personal. I am a Black woman who goes to the gynecologist. And so, just recognizing that someone who may have looked like me, may have experienced this, automatically made the story personal. And I think, not to get too personal, but I was going through my own sort of gynecological issues at the time when I was writing the play. And so there were many times when it became personal because I would be going to the gynecologist and then I would go home and write this play. And so for me, I think it was always personal, and it felt like I really owed it to these women who had to endure some pretty painful situations in order to facilitate J. Marion Sims' goal of fixing fistulas, and then therefore the growth of gynecology. I owed it to these women to try and craft a play that could, in some small way, give voice or give a snapshot of what they may have felt and experienced.
I mean, do you think, you personally, that these women knew what they were getting into?
I'm sure at some point they may have realized it. I mean, the fact is that they were experimented on numerous times. So, I always say they may not have really understood it the first time, but they sure as hell probably figured it out the second time. I assume it was probably complicated. Having a fistula is painful. It can be ostracizing. It can be uncomfortable. And I'm sure it is probably something that they desperately wanted fixed. Did they want to be operated on upwards of 20 times? I don't know, And unfortunately, they weren't in a position to say yes or no to that. They didn't, by being enslaved, you literally don't own your own body. So I hope in my heart of hearts that, they felt that the surgeries would ultimately work, that it would lead to something good. But, I don't know, unfortunately, how they felt in surgery number 5, if they wanted to continue or not.
In the play, you brought up the cruel belief that Black people don't feel pain the way white people do. And shockingly, you say that some medical students still feel that way today. Where did this idea come from? And how could it persist?
There was a University of Virginia study done, and it was all about trying to see if Black and white patients were receiving the same pain management. And the researcher included questions to the medical professionals about their assumptions around Black patients versus white patients. So some of the notions that were put forth was, is it true or false that Black people have thicker skin? Is it true or false that Black people's blood coagulates quicker than white patients? Is it true or false that Black people have less sensitive nerve endings? And if I remember correctly, it was something like 73% of the medical professionals that answered it said one of those sorts of things were true. That they believed that Black people had thicker skin, or that their blood coagulated faster, so on and so forth. And it was sort of eye-opening and began to really point to the fact that there are some lasting notions that, come out of the period the play takes place in. And it's scarier when it's a medical professional who in theory has gone through medical school. And it really was sort of shocking to me.
Is the character of Philomena based on a figure from real life? And if so, how does her journey form the emotional heart of Behind the Sheet?
So Philomena is loosely based on Anarcha, who is one of the women that J. Marion Sims operated on. She is the one that he was able to successfully close the fistula on, but he did 30 surgeries in order to do that. And so
30 surgeries on her, or
on her. So it was her 30th surgery that was successful. And so Philomena in the play, that is sort of her, quote unquote medical journey. In terms of who she is as a person, that was all imagination and just reading about different women during slavery, different women who had experienced surgeries like this and other medical sort of surgeries that were happening around the same time. I did want to really have a character who, in a small way, told Anarcha's story, because I think that's the thing for me that really knocked me down the first time I read about J. Marion Sims, was this idea that someone had to endure that surgery 30 times.
You went into considerable detail about the surgical procedures of that time in history. What did you learn about the state of medical treatment in the 1840s?
We think about doctors, we think about them in white coats and in clean facilities. And those things are actually more recent. In 1840s, we didn't really have a clear idea of how germs affect the body and cause infection. I remember one of the things that a historian said to me is that idea of a white coat, that is not what they were wearing. The spaces weren't necessarily clean. And so I think that was a big learning for me, and just a mind shift of course, we've come a long way, but we had to learn that somewhere along the line.
Behind the Sheet tells the story of strength and sisterhood in the face of cruelty. Have you explored this theme in other works?
I think so. I feel like in the last few years especially, a lot of my writing has circled around Black women specifically, and sort of the hardships that Black women, and in some cases all women and all people, are really experiencing. But I have been really interested in the intricacies of connection and of pain and joy, and how it is beautiful to be in a community or with a community of people who understand some of the hardships that you're going through, and how that is beautiful and joyful, but also how that is complicated and hard, and how do we take care of each other when we are all experiencing some of the same hardships. And so I definitely feel like I'm in a moment where I'm looking at and appreciating the people in my life, and therefore putting that sense in my plays, who are there to support, and who are there to complicate, and who are there also suffering along next to you.
Charly Evon Simpson, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.